And I think that's the juiciest kind of science fiction. Be replaced by another creature that looked and sounded just like you, but
It's been called the horror film that turned conformity into the ultimate terror. Invasion of the Body Snatchers didn't just entertain audiences, it exposed the chilling possibility that losing your humanity might be as simple as falling asleep in the wrong place at the wrong time. This tale of alien invasion through emotional emptiness combined low-budget ingenuity with profound social commentary about the price of fitting in. Today, we're entering the deceptively peaceful town of Santa Mira, California, where the greatest horror isn't what's trying to get in, but what's already replaced the people you thought you knew, to uncover the terrifying truth behind the film that made Paranoia an art form. The B-movie that became Cold War prophecy. Invasion of the Body Snatchers emerged from Allied artists' B-movie production line as a simple alien invasion story. But director Don Siegel transformed the modest budget project into sophisticated commentary on 1950s, social conformity, and Cold War paranoia. What most fans don't realize is that studio executives initially viewed the film as disposable science fiction entertainment with no deeper meaning or cultural significance. Siegel's vision of suburban paranoia and gradual loss of individuality resonated far beyond typical genre expectations, creating a story that worked simultaneously as thriller entertainment and social criticism. The screenplay's genius lay in making the alien threat indistinguishable from normal community pressure to conform and avoid making waves. The cast has revealed that Siegel encouraged them to play their characters' growing isolation and desperation as realistic responses to impossible circumstances, grounding the fantastic premise in recognizable human psychology rather than typical B-movie melodrama. Studio marketing initially promoted the film as standard monster movie fare, completely missing the sophisticated themes about individuality versus conformity that would make Body Snatchers one of cinema's most influential horror films and a touchstone for paranoid thriller storytelling. Kevin McCarthy's Dr. Miles Bennell, The Last Man Standing. Kevin McCarthy's portrayal of Dr. Miles Bennell created the template for the lone protagonist fighting against impossible odds and universal disbelief. His performance balanced medical professionalism with mounting hysteria as his character realized that his entire community was being systematically replaced by emotionless duplicates. The cast has revealed that McCarthy approached Miles as a rational man, slowly discovering that logic and evidence meant nothing when the entire social structure had been compromised. His challenge involved making the character's growing paranoia seem reasonable rather than pathological. McCarthy's physical performance emphasized exhaustion and desperation. As Miles fought a battle he couldn't possibly win against an enemy that looked exactly like everyone he'd ever trusted. His portrayal made audiences question their own ability to recognize authentic human emotion versus skilled imitation. What most viewers don't realize is that McCarthy's most effective moments came from underplaying rather than overacting, suggesting the terror of someone trying to maintain sanity while everything familiar became threatening. His commitment to the character's isolation made the audience feel equally alone and vulnerable. Dana Winters, Becky Driscoll, Love in the Time of Pod. People. Dana Winters, Becky Driscoll represented both romantic hope and ultimate tragedy within the film's exploration of emotional connection under existential threat. Her performance balanced genuine affection for Miles with growing awareness that love itself might not survive the community's transformation into emotionless efficiency. The cast has revealed that Winter understood Becky as someone fighting to preserve human feeling against forces that viewed emotion as weakness and inefficiency. Her character's struggle between safety through conformity and dangerous individuality reflected the film's central themes about social pressure. Winter's chemistry with McCarthy created authentic romantic tension that made their relationship feel worth preserving despite impossible odds. Their scenes together emphasized how personal connections provided the last refuge against dehumanizing social forces. Her character's ultimate fate, succumbing to the pods despite her love for Miles, represented the film's darkest suggestion that even the strongest human emotions might prove inadequate against systematic pressure to abandon individual identity for collective harmony and social peace. The pod people, creating horror through absence. The genius of Body Snatchers lay in making the absence of human emotion more terrifying than any traditional monster, with the cast creating horror through subtle performance choices that suggested familiar people had been replaced by perfect but soulless imitations. The cast has revealed that playing snatched versions required careful attention to small behavioral details, slightly different speech patterns, reduced emotional responses, and mechanical social interactions that felt almost but not quite human. What most fans don't realize is that the pod people weren't meant to seem obviously alien, but rather like people who had simply stopped caring about anything beyond basic survival and social efficiency. This approach made the threat feel more realistic and personally threatening. The supporting cast worked together to create community atmosphere where normalcy gradually became sinister through accumulated small changes rather than dramatic transformation scenes. Their collective performance suggested how easily human society could slide into emotionless conformity without anyone noticing until too late. Don Siegel's direction, Paranoia as visual language. Don Siegel crafted Invasion of the Body Snatchers using visual techniques that transformed ordinary small-town settings into landscapes of creeping dread through careful attention to shadows, empty spaces, and the subtle wrongness of familiar places. His documentary-style approach avoided typical horror movie conventions, instead creating atmosphere through realistic photography that made fantastic events feel like genuine news footage. The cast has revealed that Siegel encouraged naturalistic performances that grounded the sci-fi elements in believable human behavior. Siegel's direction of crowd scenes emphasized how normal social gatherings could become threatening when viewed with suspicious eyes, making audiences question the difference between healthy community spirit and dangerous conformity pressure. What most viewers don't realize is that many of the film's most effective moments came from what Siegel chose not to show rather than elaborate special effects, using suggestion and implication to create psychological tension that lingered long after the credits rolled. The special effects that made the impossible believable. The practical pod effects in Body Snatchers achieved maximum impact through simplicity and suggestion rather than elaborate creature design, creating alien life forms that felt both organic and deeply unnatural through innovative use of foam, plants, and careful photography. Ted Howarth's production design transformed everyday locations into alien landscapes through subtle changes that made familiar environments feel subtly wrong and threatening. What most fans don't realize is that many of the most effective visual elements were achieved through lighting and camera angles rather than expensive effects. The cast has revealed that working with the practical pod effects required imagination and precise timing, as many transformation sequences involved reacting to elements that would be enhanced during post-production editing and optical work. The film's minimal effects, budget-forced creative solutions that emphasize psychological horror over visual spectacle, proving that effective science fiction could create lasting impact through atmosphere and performance rather than elaborate technical displays. Carmen Dragon's score, music for a dying world. Carmen Dragon's orchestral score for Invasion of the Body. Snatchers used traditional symphonic elements to create mounting tension and dread, with musical themes that suggested both pastoral beauty and underlying menace within the same compositions. The cast has revealed that Dragon's score became essential to understanding their characters' emotional states, with the music providing guidance for scenes that required careful balance between normal social interaction and growing paranoid awareness. What most viewers don't realize is that some of the film's most effective moments use complete absence of music to emphasize character isolation, and the unnaturalness of certain situations, creating audio landscapes that felt as empty as the pod people's emotional states. The integration of natural environmental sounds with orchestral music created sonic atmosphere that supported the film's themes about the relationship between civilization and nature, suggesting how easily human society could be absorbed into something alien yet superficially familiar. Hidden political allegory: McCarthyism or communist invasion? Invasion of the Body Snatchers functioned as sophisticated political allegory that could be interpreted as either warning against communist infiltration or criticism of McCarthyist conformity pressure, with the ambiguous message making the film more powerful and enduring than simple propaganda. The cast has revealed that they understood their characters as people caught between competing pressures to conform to social expectations while maintaining individual identity and personal beliefs, reflecting real anxieties about political loyalty and social acceptance. The film's portrayal of community members turning against individualistic neighbors reflected both fears about communist cells and concerns about loyalty investigations that destroyed careers and friendships based on ideological suspicion rather than actual evidence. What most fans don't realize is that the story's effectiveness came from its refusal to provide clear political answers, instead, exploring how any ideology could become dehumanizing when it required complete emotional conformity and the abandonment of personal conscience and individual thought. The ending that studios tried to change. The original conclusion of Body Snatchers ended with Miles's desperate highway warning that humanity was doomed, but studio executives demanded a more optimistic framing device that suggested authorities might still save civilization from the pod invasion. The cast has revealed that they preferred the darker original ending, which emphasized the hopelessness of fighting against forces that had already compromised the entire social structure and eliminated the possibility of effective resistance. McCarthy's iconic final scene, screaming warnings at indifferent motorists, became one of cinema's most memorable horror endings, despite studio attempts to soften its impact through additional footage that suggested governmental intervention might provide salvation. What most viewers don't realize is that the framing device fundamentally altered the film's meaning from tragic warning about inevitable social conformity to more conventional thriller where individual heroism could still triumph over systematic threats to human independence and emotional authenticity. The legacy that spawned a genre. Invasion of the Body Snatchers established the template for paranoid invasion stories that influenced countless horror and science fiction films, creating narrative framework where the greatest threat came from the inability to distinguish between authentic humanity and skilled imitation. The cast has revealed that they initially had no sense of the film's potential cultural impact, viewing it as well-crafted but modest genre entertainment, rather than the foundation for decades of subsequent paranoid thriller storytelling. The film's prediction of modern surveillance culture and conformity pressure made it increasingly relevant to audiences facing new forms of social control and technological monitoring that made individual privacy and authentic self-expression more difficult to maintain. What most fans don't realize is that Body Snatchers' influence extends beyond direct remakes into broader cultural discussions about authenticity, conformity, and the ways that social pressure can eliminate individual identity without anyone noticing until resistance becomes impossible. Invasion of the Body Snatchers endures as a horror masterpiece because Don Siegel and his cast understood that the most effective terror comes from threats to human identity rather than physical destruction. The film succeeded by grounding fantastic concepts in recognizable social anxieties about conformity, creating a story that felt both timeless and urgently contemporary. McCarthy and Winter's committed performances made audiences care about characters whose love and individuality represented everything worth preserving against forces that promised peace through emotional emptiness, Siegel's direction proved that atmospheric filmmaking could create lasting psychological impact without elaborate effects or obvious scares. Are we losing our humanity to technology and social media pressure? Can authentic individuality survive in societies that reward conformity? How would we recognize if we were being slowly replaced by more efficient but emotionally empty versions of ourselves? Invasion of the Body Snatchers warned us that the price of fitting in might be losing everything that makes us human. Subscribe for more analysis of films that dared to ask uncomfortable questions. And remember, they're here already, and you might be next. Invasion of the Body Snatchers proved that the greatest horror comes from losing what makes us human. If you enjoyed uncovering the secrets behind this paranoid masterpiece that turned conformity into terror, subscribe for more deep dives into the films that warned us about dangers we're still facing today.